live. Hello, UK Crime Book Club. I'm here just chatting to Helen Fields about the institution already, and there are so many things I can't say on camera while we are live, but oh my word, if you've not read this one yet, you are in for a treat. So Helen, introduce yourself, please, and I'll pin us in the group.
Hi, yes, my name's Helen Fields. I'm probably best known for the D.I. Callanack series that I write that is set in Scotland. This is actually my 12th crime novel. I also write as H.S. Chandler. Yes, though, this book came out on the 2nd of March. It's called The Institution. That's actually the second book that features Dr. Connie Woolwine. Previously, she popped up in The Shadow Man. And she had a very brief moment as well in One for Sorrow, which was a Luke Callanack book. So she's a character who's kind of, come in and out of my life a little bit. Previously, I was a criminal barrister, and that's my background. It's how I got into crime writing. I've also worked in the media industry a little bit. And yes, I live in West Sussex with my 3 teenagers and my husband. And yes, I just spend all day basically either cleaning up or writing.
Oh, I know that feeling very well. Except for me, it's not as much writing, more other bits of work that get in the way and interspersed with cleaning. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. So the first thing we need to say about the institution, have you got a copy with you?
I do.
The cover. It's one of those covers that you look at and go, "Ooh."
Yeah, in fact, I've got that version, which has got a lovely back cover.
Oh wow!
I know, and do see, because this is the publisher did a special edition with a hardback. Enter at your own risk, leave if you can, which I think is gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous.
And they put a map in it as well. So I don't know what it looks like if you see it on ebook, but that's the map.
That's the same one, I think, that's in my ebook.
Yeah, which is very cool. And in fact, my husband did the first version of that for me when I was writing the book, because I really needed, every time somebody goes up a corridor or that sort of thing, or I needed to know how much space they had, it was really important for me to be able to visualize. And I sent it off to my publisher. And they said, well, that's great, we've got it, so why don't we do a proper map? So they sent it to they did it a little bit more detail, but it's beautiful, I think.
I do. I really liked it. And it must have really helped you to get a sense of place, because as we were saying, as you were telling me just before we went online, this it's not based on anywhere geographically or a real building. It's probably ideas taken from places, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I love mountains and lakes, and it's all the sorts of geography that I really like, actually. But it was very important for me because it's such a specific setup in terms of how it looks, with the mountains in the background and the lake and that sort of thing. But I didn't want to base it in a single place, because you always limit your geography. I think for me, if I'm putting something somewhere real, then it's got to be reflective of the place. I can't then ignore the fact that there are roads or, whatever else. But if I built it entirely from my imagination, it meant I was able to construct it precisely the way I wanted, which, with a lot from mystery, both inside the institution and everything that's around it, needed to be something that was under my control. And that's why it's not located anywhere that's real geographically. It means that readers can really build it themselves in their head from the ground up, and that they can control exactly how that environment looks.
Just a really nice comments just popped up. So I've got Laura and Steve who said hello. Hi Laura, hi Steve. Michael has said, love your books. One for Sorrow is one of my all-time favourites. What a lovely thing to start the interview with.
That is, and of course I was saying Connie pops up in One for Sorrow, and although it's a really small bit, she goes in and advises, and she has a conversation with Luke Callanack. And it's actually a relatively short conversation, but it was quite a touching conversation, and it finally allowed him a little bit of space for him to work out some of his issues. I love Connie as a character. She's really good fun to write.
And to read.
She's quite demanding to write, because, of course, she doesn't really let up. She doesn't let up on other people or herself. So she's constantly got that internal dialogue going, which makes her kind of hard work. But also, as a writer, I slightly never know what she's going to say or do. And sometimes she kind of takes me by surprise, which is really joyful when you find a character like that.
Did you always know from Connie being in One for Sorrow that you were going to give her her own book?
Yeah, so she popped up in The Shadow Man first, and then I think I wrote her into One for Sorrow. I didn't know that I was going to write her into anything else. So I really previously had no idea that she was going to end up with the institution, that I was going to take those characters and do anything else with them. But when I did all my research for Shadow Man, which came out a little while ago now, I was living in San Diego, and a friend of a friend was a forensic profiler, psychological profiler for the FBI. And they let me send them all my case notes for my first book for Shadow Man. And they worked on Collie Woolwine with me. They gave me all the language. They worked the case for me. They talked to me about profiling. They talked to me about how they would actually do a profile from scratch, what they would be disregarding, what the process was. So I built Connie Woolwine based on a real profiler that I worked with, based on, all the language that's in all the books is real language that they use. And I didn't then want to let her go. It did seem to me that having done so much work to build Connie up and to make her very realistic, sorry, there's my family walking past in the background, it was a shame not to give her another book. So when I had the opportunity to find something new to do, then it just seemed to me that she really had to come back again.
I've got a very random question for you now. I use a blue pen, and I've constantly got one in my hand. You've got a black pen. Do you always write in black? The reason I've got blue is because when my husband was in the army, anytime anyone had a black pen, that was all they were allowed to sign things in. So he would constantly pick up black pens, put them out of the way. So nobody ever had a pen, but I always had one because I started to write in blue. So that made me wonder, because of these obviously
so
army links in the book, just made me wonder about the pen.
Absolutely. Do you know, I when I was at the bar, and I used to do courts martial work, so kind of I did a fair bit of time with the forces as well. But I only ever wrote in black biro. So when I was ever in court, I constantly do. I walk around the house without even knowing I'm doing it. And the only time I actually think I need a pen is the only time I don't have one in my hand. So constantly, whatever I'm doing, if it's anything where I have to be organised, it helps my brain get into work mode. It helps me focus to hold a pen. Isn't that weird?
Does the same with me. I've constantly got a pen with me.
Yeah.
And I realised this morning, for some reason, the lid wasn't on the end. I'm sorry, everyone. I know this is really random, but I couldn't write with it. I had to go and find one with a lid on the end.
I'm the same.
I don't know if it's exactly the weighting of the pen or what it is, force of habit, but
yeah, something missing.
Yeah, absolutely something missing. So we're about 10 minutes in. So do you want to do the reading that you've prepared? Now I'm at 70% of this book. I've been a bit of a slow reader the last week. It's unusual for me, but I'm not quite at this bit. I'm really excited to hear it because I know it's going to make me read even faster afterwards to get to this bit.
So I'm just going to do a page or so, but it's from chapter 28. So it's a fair bit of the way. It's about, I think you're nearly there actually, Sam, in terms of 70%. And it's not got too many spoilers, but I've got to spoil it a little bit for you to give it some context, which is that, of course, Connie has a background of when she was 18, she herself was institutionalized. When following an accident, she realized that she couldn't talk and nobody knew why. And so she ended up in a hospital having psychiatric treatment. And so what happens when she gets more and more stressed being in the institution this time is that she starts to feel like she's losing her mind. And eventually events conspire and she ends up back in a what they call a quiet room on her own with a straitjacket on, wondering how on earth she's going to get out. So this is this chapter. The quiet room wasn't. Connie could sense the storm trying to get in from behind the padded walls and supporting bricks. She felt the vibration of every slamming door along the corridor and heard the shouts and moans of the men on Heavenward who demanded answers to their questions. What was going on? Why could they smell smoke on the wind blasting through the edges of their windows? Why were they on lockdown? Benny Rubio was squealing and giggling. Harold Haskin was punctuating his shouts with repeated kicks of his door. Gregor Saint was yelling about the lake. Was anyone checking on it? Couldn't they see what was happening? Some of the staff car engines were flooded, but by far the worst of all the noise, the loudest, the most awful, was coming from inside Connie's head. She could hear a baby crying in the distance. Connie wanted those cries to stop, but she knew that the moment they did, it would be too late to save Aurora. She also knew that from the heights of Heavenward, up in the tallest tower, those cries were all in her imagination, and still she couldn't separate them from reality. Voices crept in too, voices she'd hoped never to hear again. The most dominant of them was the psychiatrist who'd instigated her own committal, where she'd spent too much time in a room indistinguishable from the space she now inhabited. In you go, it's for your own good. If you won't speak to us, then we'll have to assume that silence is what you're after. I think you should understand that a silent place is a very lonely place. It won't take you long to start communicating after this. She could see him, clear as the day she'd first met him, in his pinstripe suit, floral handkerchief poking out of his pocket, looking around at his medical entourage for admiration as she'd hunkered down in the corner, quietly weeping. It had never occurred to her that she might revisit that terrifying corner, that it could all go so horribly wrong. And was she crying again like she had all those years ago? She thought so, but she couldn't raise her hand to check, and stuck between the then and the now, she wasn't sure what she was remembering and what she was actually experiencing. I won't read any more, because if you haven't read it, it'll ruin it. There we go.
That's it. Interview over. I'm going to go and read. Oh, my word. There are so many parallels between, I'm just thinking back to different parts. I'm going to go to the very beginning, to the first chapter, because Connie, the way you write Connie is, she's wonderful and maybe comes across a little unorthodox in her practices, and but in a way that makes her really endearing. And the brutality of the first chapter is kind of disguised by Connie's warm nature and her taking her time, and just the detail, the attention to detail, the word choices that make you feel so many things as you read the first chapter. I thought it was absolute genius. I just thought it was beautifully done. And there's this barbaric scene. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah. So we drop straight into a scene where Connie Woolwine is in the morgue, the old morgue. It's not being used anymore, but because they're trying to hide this body, because it's all Connie's gone in undercover. So and I should have set it up a little bit better, that it's a nurse who's been killed, and the nurse was heavily pregnant, and it's a fetal abduction. So Connie's undercover because they've only got, they think, 5 days maximum that this baby can survive. So kind of locked room with a ticking clock. So she goes in, and the first thing we really see is Connie with the corpse, that this dead nurse. And I don't know how many of you, because I talk about it in the book, remember the game where you hand around a piece of folded paper. Do it at Christmas when you've got loads of people sitting around, and you all draw a funny little bit, and somebody draws a head, and you fold the paper down and you hand it along, somebody else draws the body, and you draw these funny things. And she's thinking about that as she folds down the sheet, because of course she's looking at the injuries from the top down, from the head, then her shoulders, and then gets to her abdomen. Obviously, this baby was taken. And Connie is interesting because she's incredibly analytical, and she has a very structured brain, and she's very good at what she does, but everything is extremely personal to her. And so she talks to the dead, and I think when I wrote her in The Shadow Man, the first time I wrote her, she actually pulled up her second gurney and kind of laid on it alongside, where she couldn't do this here, but she talks to the dead bodies, and I think it helps her get into the mind of what happened, and it helps her establish a sense of responsibility for the job that she's about to do. And yes, she is quite an odd character, but it was the only way to write it that didn't make her seem like a pathologist herself or like another police officer. There had to be another level of contact between her and the cases she's dealing with, and that's how I did it.
And it's so beautifully done because the whole scene is barbaric, and it is right at the beginning, so it's not spoiler filled. She's literally been, strapped down, not anaesthetized, and just had her child taken from her while she's still pregnant. But again, the way you've got her stroking her hair, holding her hand, talking to her, almost giving herself a minute before she does the next thing that she's going to do.
Yeah.
I think it's a level of respect for Tara, and it's a level of respect for her own sanity, it felt like. Just to be kind and courteous with Tara, but to give herself a second as well.
And it's based on a real case. So when we first moved out to San Diego, I mean, there have been a number of cases of fetal abductions, but there was a case that happened almost as soon as I moved out to the States. And it was didn't take place in somewhere like the institution. It took place in a young woman's house who had arranged for a woman to come around. She thought to sell her a load of baby clothes because she didn't have much money. And this woman has said, I'm selling these, I'll come around to your house. And did exactly that and then stole the baby. So this isn't this, life being really stranger than fiction. This, everything I did and very carefully researched about, how feasible it is and how long this takes and how people do it. But this is all, sadly, it's all based on real life.
I was aware that that this has happened, but that just, I can't even imagine. I'm not going to ask you to go into the research on that. I think that would be cruel and unnecessary on camera.
Yeah, and I'm very careful in the book as well about quite how much you hear, because you can imagine that there are some things that you don't need to go into detail.
Yeah, you've allowed us to fill in the gaps with our own imagination, and I thank you for that. Definitely. Laura said UKCBC pens are great to write with, black ink. She also has a pen with purple ink, as she worked with a friend who is dyslexic and she couldn't read anything written in blue or black ink easily. That's interesting. I suppose working with young children, I've seen the different overlays, the different coloured overlays.
Yeah.
And I read, I'm not dyslexic, but I read with a peach background on my Kindle, which just kind of softens it. Yeah. So I actually have some lovely glasses with a bit of an overlay as well that removes some of the...
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That really helps. A couple of quid off Amazon makes a big difference. It softens it for reading. Really does help. Yeah. UKCBC pens. Yeah, very nice. Black ink. Very comfy to write with. Somebody put a lot of thought into those. And Laura enjoyed your reading. She said, wonderfully read. Karen Wilkins said, wow, sounds great, Helen. Can't wait to read it on holiday soon. Where are you off to, Karen?
I know Karen. Hi, Karen.
That the research and things must have been disturbing, but I found the character profiles really interesting. So the way that we meet the characters, the way you've written them, you slowly drip feed in different elements of the what word are you going with? Are you going with guest, inmate, patients? How are you describing them? How you
monsters? They're monsters.
Monsters. Okay.
They're called, yes. They have a man called Dr. On in charge of the ward, and he insists on calling guests.
And his heart's in the right place.
It is. His heart is in the right place, actually, and he's a really interesting character because, and I've met people like this who seem to refuse to accept the reality of people. And that's very much what you see from him. So he talks about just doing psychometric tests with them as if they had a job there. And he calls them guests, and the rest of the staff really resent him for it, mainly because they're the ones doing the day-to-day cleaning up on these wards, which are terrible places to work in. Yes, so I cheated slightly because in a normal book I only get to write one serial killer, and of course I managed to set up a book where I was able to throw in loads of different serial killers and the stuff they did, and it was really interesting, and it did make me realize that when we write these things, too often we're kind of rewriting the same killer over and over again. And actually one of the challenges was to write lots of these different people who had different motivations, different pasts, different levels of psychosis, and to make them all feel very rounded and very real. And I think I think it was Gregor Saint, Professor Saint, who ends up killing lots of his students. This is not in no way a spoiler, because you've really just got to read this section, but because he gets so frustrated with them just constantly using their smartphones in his lectures. But not a million miles from the reality of how we get affected by technology, and how offensive people sometimes find it.
But thankfully, a million miles away from how we all usually handle it.
Yes.
We might tut and roll our eyes. I'm not going to tell anybody what he did, but yeah, we might do a bit of tut and eye roll. Put your phone down. It's tea time. Yeah. I'm talking. You can't be on your phone. Put it away. We're in class.
Yeah. He goes a step further than that.
Yeah, just a little. You were saying then about it being challenging, but that must be exciting as well when you get through the book and realize that all of these men that you've written, all of these serial killers, they are all completely, you could read a section and know which one you were reading about. They're all completely different.
Yeah.
Which must be exciting, but also the challenge of doing it, knowing that there might be some elements of different people's personalities that could overlap, but you need them to be distinctive, which they are. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's really difficult when you have this cast of, it's quite a big cast of characters actually, because you've got all the different patients, guests on this ward, and then you've got all the different staff members, and then I've got my kind of protagonists as well. So you have to, that's why I had to do it bit by bit, because you have to set them up, make them memorable, and then you should just be able to refer to them, so that the reader doesn't have to constantly be reminded. So it needed quite a lot of detail in it. Interestingly, baby Benny Rubio, who acts like a baby all the time, came about because I was reading about a case, a man in an American prison who has asserted his right to identify as a baby. And he's trying to insist that he be allowed to hold the hands, when he goes around the prison, he should be allowed to hold the hands of one of the prison guards, and he should have the right to wear nappies and that sort of thing. And this was a real case that was going on when I was writing the book. So that's where Benny Rubio came from. Vince East, who certainly initially or at times comes across as a slightly more sympathetic character. And I think Karen asked, am I planning any other spin-off novels about any of the characters? Well, I know that Connie's going to be making a reappearance, which probably means that Barbara is as well. And when you get to the end of the book, you'll realise that there are some questions unanswered about one particular inmate. And I guess we'll have to wait and see whether or not I follow that one up. Definitely. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing which one it is. That's interesting.
Can't say anything else.
No, absolutely not. No. Benny's an interesting character, and interesting that he's based on a real person, because you can almost, because he cries a lot and he has tantrums, and you can almost hear he annoys you through the page. He's very grating. You can almost hear him screeching as the other inmates describe it. And that's some real effort on your part there to make somebody so annoying that it leaps off the page, and you think, for crying out loud, will you just shut up? I can't bear the screech, and I can't really hear it.
It's a funny thing. We don't write sound as much as we should as writers. We tend to write dialogue, and we write visual. We write very visual descriptions of where people are, but we don't use all the senses enough. And even I have to catch myself, and I quite often don't put enough in my first edit, but we don't really tend to write about how something feels. So we'll say what clothes they were wearing, but we don't describe texture. We don't describe how things smell or taste or whatever, and sound. And actually, when you do go back after your first draft and you're looking at it in an edit again, the more of that you throw in, and it might not seem very relevant, but of course, certainly things like smell is very linked in human beings to memory. And so if you can do that, if you remember to throw in that level of detail, then what happens is that your reader will be much more affected by it. Because if you say, it smelled the way a candle does just a second after you first, snubbed out the flame, and you don't need to do anything else because already your head is going,
Can
I'm
smell
right
it.
there. I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And they're right in the moment, and you don't have to build an entire room. Sometimes you can do a lot less description by using a different sense that we don't normally think about in books. So actually, Benny Rubio was really useful to me because he's one of those who, everybody, if you don't have kids of your own, you've definitely sat on a train or an airplane with a child screaming. You've definitely had that experience.
Oh yeah.
And so without having to explain that it's irritating and that you want to get away from it, you've just got to write those few words. So yeah, he was a great character because actually he was easy to write.
You said then something came to your mind and you were kicking yourself about something. It reminded me of me being annoyed with myself when I realised that the nurse who is murdered at the beginning, Tara, you realise that actually her family are rich. She doesn't need to be in that job, and she's in there heavily pregnant. And I was thinking, well, why on earth would a woman who doesn't need to be there put herself in that situation? And I was really mad at myself because why shouldn't she be in? She's a working woman. She's chosen her career path. She's gone, and actually, you find out why she's chosen that career path. But I really annoyed myself, and I wonder how many other people read that and then afterwards had thought something ridiculous like I thought, and then thought, oh, actually, why shouldn't she be? We wouldn't think anything of it being the other way around. If the husband was working there, not quite the same because he's not pregnant, but you see my thought process and why I irritated myself.
And it's really, really tricky. And I think even as women, sometimes we fall prey to feeling the same way about things that we're kind of taught to feel about things as we grow up, kind of why, and it's very much like, why did that girl go out late at night, get drunk and wear such a short skirt? We actually can't stop ourselves quite as easily as we think we'd like to from thinking in stereotypes inside our heads. I'm no different. And when I wrote it, I was kind of like, well, would she be there? She's pregnant. And then it's kind of like, well, she should be provided with a safe system of work. She should feel safe. She should be able to go on. We shouldn't actually, it's something that happened to me when I was quite heavily pregnant and at the bar, which is that I had a client with some mental health problems. I was in Southampton Crown Court, and he needed to see me and speak to me privately. And the prison guard said, please don't go into that cell. We can't guarantee your safety. You're pregnant. You shouldn't go in. And I said, I'm really sorry. This is my job. I am going to go in there. On my head be it. But this is my client and he does need to talk to me, and I know he's mentally ill, but I'm not going to walk away. And still at times I think, should I have done it? But at the same time, I was doing the job that I was being paid to do and I was supposed to do. And it's a really difficult thing because we apply stereotypes even to ourselves sometimes. And you have to snap yourself out of it a little bit. But that said, you still have to work them through. So it's worked through in the book. So, there's still a conversation about what on earth she was doing there. Because it's unrealistic. We don't all think in this lovely way that is kind of, oh no, I'm going to pretend that, no, of course people reading the book are going to wonder what she was doing there. But she was entitled to be doing her job. And so that's how I kept it.
And I'm glad you kept it because it made me question my own thought process. And I think good books do that, and sometimes people assume that in fiction that doesn't happen, when actually a lot of the thoughts, the challenges that I've had on myself have come from authors like yourself writing things. And I might have felt one way or a different way about it, but actually you can kind of have a character arc of your own. You develop yourself through the books that you read as well.
Absolutely. I think that's right. And I think that's what a good book does, is make us think about maybe think about something in a new way. Even if it's very familiar to us, it might kind of shine a new light on it, or it might make you rethink, old tropes that we've read before. And I love reading books like that, that make me rethink what I thought, or
Yeah.
you start a book thinking one way and you end it feeling differently. That's and not every book has to be a learning curve, but I think when we take something new away from a book, it leaves us with a sense that we've come on more of a journey.
I thought it was fascinating as well how every character had their own arc. You've got a situation where it's supposed to be kind of routine, everything in a certain way. During the same building, you wouldn't expect there to be that much character development, especially it's a short space, it's 5 days that the book's set over. So you wouldn't expect there to be the room for it, yet you managed that in 400 pages.
I think that's not really, I'm not going to take credit for that one. That's what a good editor does. And I know that a lot of that character arc was what I put in. So I wrote the book, you send it off to my editors, they kind of have a read, they have a discussion, they come back to me with notes. And quite often those notes were, right, okay, because it's very hard when you first write to kind of see everything, to see the whole thing. And quite a lot of my editorial notes that I got back were, okay, well, let's look at this character a bit more. How's he going to change? One of the most interesting bits of it for me to write at the end was to follow that through, and to know that it's 100,000 word book. People can't end up the same at the end as when they start. It's also slightly because my work experience was always, I would read a set of papers, expect to meet one human being, but they'd come into the room and actually I would feel something completely different about them by the time I'd spoken to them for a couple of hours and heard their story, not read it from the page, but heard their story as they gave it to me themselves. Yeah. And that was always a really useful experience in not judging, literally not judging the book by the cover, actually.
And yeah, that's how Connie does it. So it's interesting to see that that's from your experience.
Yeah, she's quite specific about not wanting to read too much. She likes to hear. And one of the things that she uses in the book, she uses hypnotherapy. Brilliant. I actually sent my husband off to get some hypnotherapy so that he could come back and talk me all through the process and his experience of it and how it felt from the inside. So that was quite a fun, but I didn't go and do it myself because I wanted to stay on the outside of it, more like Connie would stay. So I sent him in to be one of my kind of inmates going to go through a bit of hypnotherapy, which he did for me, which was very cool.
Do you often send him off to do things?
I do. I do a lot of my research. He hasn't read any of my books, not one. But he's very, very good sounding board for me. So anything tech-wise, anything media-wise, that's all from him. I had to get him to pack me into suitcases before to see what size suitcase
I remember you saying
I would
that.
need. Yes, we talked about that before.
What
size suitcase you'd need for a body, and I get him to try knots out and say, what length of cable tie do you need to tie together, hands really convincingly, that sort of thing. So a lot of technical detail or kind of physical detail is stuff that I've made him check out for me.
Anything else that you've acted out since the last time that we spoke?
I quite often am physically thinking through action scenes, and it's stuff like there's a bit with Professor Saint where he's dragging bodies through and throwing them into a different room, and I'm kind of always up on my feet, imagining, right, if I've said somebody's on their face, which bit of their body, and they're under a table, how do I maneuver? What's going to happen? Am I going to get stuck? So anything physical, and certainly fight scenes, always I'm standing up and I work them through, because you really don't understand how the human body works until you've got one that's either fighting you or that's unconscious or that's a dead weight. It's very rarely the way it seems in your imagination. So yeah, all of that kind of stuff. But that in this book, it was more about the map. That's why the map came about. Just because there was so much, one person, and what could they see from their cell? Could they see the medical room, or do they have, which way does their window look? And so that was a lot of what I did this time, is just making absolutely sure that if I've got people passing in the corridor, which room did they come from, that sort of thing.
Can you, because you've read different things for your research, does that make it harder writing some of the scenes? Are you able to, is it kind of procedural in front of you? You're writing it and you're picturing it, but you're not really thinking too deeply about it? Because obviously reading it, I'm reading these as real people. They do, they come off the page. So how is that for you writing it? You must get asked this a lot, but I find it fascinating that anytime I ever ask this, I get a completely different answer.
Yeah, I think a lot of that I do in the edit. So quite often I write a blow by blow of everything, and then I have to go back in and say, right, I've killed my pace too much, because the problem with doing a lot of research and being very careful to make sure everything makes sense in sequence, you end up with an awful lot of, he stood up, he walked here, they did this, took him by the hand, the character did this. And you kill your pace a little bit and kill some of the drama. So the way I do it, I write the whole thing with as much detail as I want to. And it's really kind of anatomical, and, the flow is all there. And then I go back when I'm rewriting for the second time, and I'm like, okay, strike that detail. And what you end up with is all the really important parts that make sense, but without killing the pace, which has to stay in there for the reader.
Making a mental note of that. We've got some more hellos. Karen says hello, and Leslie says hello. I know that Leslie always says that you're one of her go-to authors.
That's
So
so
that's
nice.
a nice thing.
Do you know, I don't think that as a reader you should ever underestimate how that feels to an author, because it's a very different thing knowing that lots of people have just picked up your book. When people come back and make an effort to come back and read you again, and I know this as a reader, I do it with certain authors. I go back and pick their books up, and I feel like I've got an ongoing relationship with them, and not so much with the author, but with their voice. And to the extent that which author you're reading, because you hear that voice again and you're immediately at home. And it doesn't matter if it's part of a series, it doesn't matter if it's a standalone or if it's a new series, you have that author's voice in your head straight away. And there's something really, it's kind of reassuring, but it's also quite intimate, because you're straight back into their world. And so, yes, I too have my go-to readers, and I can't tell you how nice it is to be that writer for someone else, because it means the world to me as a writer that people make the effort to come back for more books.
So, do you want to tell us any of your favourite authors? It feels really like an awful question to ask authors, because you all tend to read so much.
Yeah.
It's like when somebody asks me, I go, it takes me a second to engage my brain with it.
I always sit here thinking, who do I read? I think I've read everything Stephen King's ever written. And that's a really good example of voice, because I read Fairy Tale recently, which was his latest book. And, in the first paragraph, I was back in his world, in his voice. And it wouldn't have mattered what he'd written. I could hear his voice. And I'm the same with Dean Koontz. I read everything. On a crime basis, I read everything Christopher Brookmyre writes. And Chris is Scottish, and I know him. And what's funny about that is I literally hear his voice, not just the writing voice, but I hear it as if I were chatting with him. But I also kind of read a lot of historical, Jessie Burton, and that sort of thing. Essie Fox, who writes kind of Gothic Victorian stuff. So I read really widely. I don't just read crime. In fact, if anything, when I'm writing a book, I don't read crime, because it's really important to me that I don't have crime writers' voices in my head while I'm writing my own stuff. So I tend to read kind of modern historical or horror. I read everything horror-wise. So
that's something that I often ask, because lots of people can still read crime when they're writing it, which I find odd. I don't know how people can manage it, because surely it must kind of seep in different ways.
It does, and I think the real danger is that even if it's just a turn of phrase, I don't think you would ever pick up a really big idea, because you'd be really conscious of that. But also, it's a bit of a busman's holiday. If I'm going to be writing all day and then, close my laptop and open a book, I want to be taken on a really different journey than the one I'm, going on all day. So for me, it's much more of a holiday to choose different genres. But I'm constantly worried, that, I'll read something and then go, oh, that's a really good idea to do with forensics. Or, oh, that's a really good idea about how, CCTV doesn't always show you what you think you're going to see. And it's way too easy, way too easy to end up just kind of even subconsciously putting something from someone else's into your book. And that terrifies me so much that I can't do it.
AJ Aberford says, really enjoying the interview. So that's because Helen's brilliant. I will say, with this book, you have really gone out of your way to avoid technology now that you bring it up.
Yeah.
Or to maybe not avoid it completely, to control it.
Yeah.
You are in complete control of what they can use and when they can use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, and as it would be on a ward, but also, the environment helped. The thing was with Connie, she has to go through, her character arc is the biggest of the book. And we don't normally get that with an investigator. If you think about normal crime, your detectives, or whether it's a journalist or a private investigator, normally is the kind of constant figure through the book. And this had to be the opposite. So she had to go through a bigger journey than anyone else. And I had to cut her off in order to do that. So I've got Connie Woolwine and her sidekick Brodie Barder. And not only did I have to cut off her access to technology, I had to get to a point where I cut her off from Brodie, because she had to go through this terrible journey and this self-doubt in order to come out the other end of it in the way that I needed her to. And so, yes, I very much cut her off. She occasionally manages to kind of get a brief bit of access to the outside world. And that was really nice, actually, because I write so many police procedurals. Well, I'm constantly thinking, right, okay, traffic lights quite often have cameras, CCTV, kind of mobile phone masts. We know where everyone is. We know when they've been on social media. We can check their bank account. We know which cash point they're going to. And that's all, sometimes that's great. But quite often, quite a lot of the time, it means that you're really limited in terms of how much you can stop people from being able to phone someone, and you quite often go, oh, they can't warn, person A can't warn person B. And you kind of go, well, of course they'd be able to warn them, one way or another. There's going to be a phone or a laptop or a kind of something. So it was lovely. It was joyful to be able to write a book where I wasn't constantly thinking about kind of who had their mobile phone on them.
It is interesting that you have cut her off from Brodie. I'm not quite at that bit yet, but there are elements of it because they are in separate rooms. Yeah. So she can only access him at certain times, and vice versa. But he's a very grounding influence for her. So I suppose for her to spiral to the part where you've read out the next bit, that's you were going to have to do that. You were going to have to put things in the way so that she's not got this wonderful grounding influence, this person who just sees right through her, calls her out on everything, just sees who she is and what she's trying to hide.
Yes, I love Brodie Barder. He's great because he's her polar opposite. And one of the other things, of course, was by separating them, she's absolutely terrified about what's happening to him. He's terrified for her. And so it was a way of ratcheting the stakes in the book up and up and up, because nobody really knows what anyone else is going through unless they're with them in that moment. So that, again, was really good fun. Brodie doesn't play a massive part in the book, but he is a really important little character in the book. They've been together previously. He's an Met police officer from the Specialist Kidnapping Squad. So he is, yes, grounded is exactly the right word. It's when she can't have access to Brodie Barder that actually she really starts to unravel.
And I can picture what's about to happen before I even read it. So it'll be interesting to see just how far that goes. But when you started writing, How soon did you realise this needs to be set over a very short period of time for this to work?
It almost straight away, and I hadn't really thought the timeline through when I knew I was writing a fetal abduction, but actually a lot of that is to do so the 5-day kind of absolute limit is the real one in this scenario.
Okay.
And that was very helpful because what it
I
meant
will
was,
not be Googling that, so I'm glad
yeah.
you told me that. I
Yes,
won't be looking.
but that's all real. But what's really interesting about that is that it gave me this finite time, which had it gone on any longer, obviously the police would have to have been called in. So it had to be a timeline whereby the whole of the pressure was on Connie alone. So it let me do that, but it also meant that she had to take a few risks in terms of how quickly she got to know people, who she chose to confide in. And she does choose to be relatively honest with a couple of people. She has to make a couple of friends. She has to find a couple of people that she judges she can trust. And assess people very quickly. So what it meant was by having this 5-day time frame, I was able to make her take more risks than she otherwise would have done as a professional. And it meant that when I threw Brody Barder in there as well, it kind of was able, he was having to try and take risks his end, because otherwise it would have been a much safer book. And it was never going to work as a safe book. It had to be high stakes, high pressure. There's no time left right from the start.
I'm not going to say who it is because when people read, they will know when they get to it. There is one I'm assuming this person is just a very small character. They were early on in the book. They were just a brief conversation she had, just this moment with this person, and just snippets of different things like that just kind of bring you back down to earth, just release the tension just a little bit, and then you smack us right back into it. And those clever little things with these people, I'll tell you who it is afterwards, but I've got a feeling you probably know exactly who I'm talking about. Things like that just add so much depth to a book and give your main character, give Connie just time to breathe just for a minute.
Yeah.
And for all of us to kind of sit back and just enjoy having this nice calm moment, this one conversation with somebody, and then right back into the thick of it again.
Yeah, it's really important for pacing because you can't keep on a whole book, not a book of this length, when the stakes are high. I mean, the stakes are high throughout, but it can't all be a peak. It has to be a peak and a drop, because otherwise, and I was talking to someone about this a few days ago. It's like a movie, like a horror movie, when you get too many jump scares and you get too many in a row. And what happens is you start anticipating them and they don't shock you and you don't jump anymore. And it means you switch off from the whole movie and you get a bit bored of it and you start going, oh, this is ridiculous. And so it's super important writing books like this, especially where there's a lot of tension, that you come out of it and you have to slow it down. And I do it with brief conversations with characters who might have popped up elsewhere. I do it with even characters inside where it just has to be normal because she's also someone who has to still go and get some dinner. She has to get a shower. She has to kind of, go and just take a moment. And it was really necessary for good pacing, because otherwise it would have I think the reader would have just felt bombarded. And I think that's a shame because you really need some time. And also, you have to build in a couple of likable characters. She's trapped on a ward with 5 serial killers and some not very nice staff members. And I think as a reader, I don't like books where I don't like anyone at all. It's, for that emotional engagement to work, you have to be able to build in a few nice moments.
There are some with, and I'm not going to name this character again because I think it spoils one of the punchlines. But there is a young person that she spends time with, and absolutely beautiful friendship. Really, the thing I love about Connie is that she manages, with everything that's going on and all this pressure and this race against time, she still manages to find moments to make sure that everybody else around her that she's engaging with is okay. She'll go and
Yes.
take 10 minutes out of a day just to check on somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that about her.
I do. And I think with her, that's what comes from her history and from having been in a place like that. I think she has this real empathy, this very broad empathy for everyone, and she's constantly trying to be her best. It's also what makes her a very angry person. When she sees other people not behaving in a way that's respectful or empathetic.
Yeah.
It's both the source of all of the good things about her, and it's also the source of her, her fury and her ire. So I think it's at her core is this a desire to always take time out for people. And it's nice. It's nice because it gives you a moment to write a little tiny bit of her that gives you more of an insight into who she is. Because the problem is, if she's just constantly investigating or profiling, if you just see that bit of her, you don't get a 360. And in fact, she's such a big character in the book.
Yeah.
She's so important that I really had to build in other interactions so that you had a sense of who she was all the way through her.
Leslie says she wants to know what you're working on next.
I am working on the hardback that will come out in 2024, and I've nearly finished it. And that, again, is about profiling, but it's about using technology to profile and the problems that causes. So it's set now in with technology that is available now, but it's about us really starting to use that more widely. So whether or not you apply for a university course, or you apply to join the military, or you want to join social services, or you want to adopt someone, it's about the fact that we have the technology to profile everyone, to see if you're suitable. And actually, when we look at the way the world is going, and we're saying to the police, you've got to be much more careful with who you give arrest powers to. You just can't let anyone into the police force these days.
Yeah.
That's too dangerous. This sort of profiling for all jobs is coming, and we currently do psychometric test people. That's really about suitability for a job. It's not so much about let's figure out who the sociopath is in the group, and let's kind of and there are, honestly, if you're looking at kind of stock market jobs and things like that, you've got to have employers who say, I want the sociopaths. They work longer, they're harder, they don't care about how they negotiate, they don't care, they just want the result. And so it's really about what happens when you use that sort of technology, but then you find out some things about people that turns out to be very, very dangerous. So that is what I'm writing at the moment. Still serial killers, it's fine. There are going to be there's still bodies, but it's with that little edge of a little bit of tech that starts to get out of control.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see where you go with that one. We are almost out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. Do you want to give everyone a recap of just quickly before we do that, somebody's asked if it's a standalone.
It is a standalone one. Yeah. I was saying earlier, these are the same characters who appeared in a book I wrote a couple of years ago called The Shadow Man, that was set in Edinburgh with Police Scotland. So that was more of an overlap with my D.I. Kalanick books. But in fact, you absolutely don't need to have read anything. Most of the people, I think, who've picked up this book have picked it up as a complete standalone. And the few little bits that are relevant about Connie's history, I go all through that. So no, if you want to pick this one up as a first one, then you really don't need to go back and read anything else at all. I think most people haven't.
And that was Leslie as well. So thank you, Leslie. Do you want to give us a recap and tell people where they can go back? I did listen to a snippet of the audiobook as well, so I know that's available.
Yeah. And if you want to go and if you go onto Amazon, onto their audiobook, you can click listen to a sample and listen to part of it. Genevieve Swallow, who's an amazing narrator, has narrated the audiobook, and she's done a really good job. So yes, you can get it from, at the moment with a hardback, it's either Waterstones, or you can order it online from WH Smith's, or online from Amazon, or ebook through wherever you normally get your ebooks. And the audiobook's available from Audible. yes, the paperback, if you want to wait for that, which a lot of people do, comes out in September, and that will be more widely available. And please do let me know. I'm all over social media, and it really is lovely to get feedback. It's lovely to get contact from people, and I appreciate all of it. So if you read it and have questions, or you want to tell me what you thought, then find me somewhere on some bit of social media and let me know.
Well, thank you to everyone who's joined in tonight, and thank you, Helen, so much for coming to talk to us about the institution.
Thank you.
And now
Sam,
I'm going to go read the last bit.
Yeah, go and finish it, and then Sam, you're going to have to message me when you finished it.
Absolutely,
because
will
there are a
do.
few things that you'll want to say to me.
Okay. I look forward to it. Thank you, and I hope you'll come back next year for the next book.
I'd love to, and thank you for everyone who came to listen tonight. That was really cool. It was lovely.